everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you a recent reads video. It has been a week since I last checked in with you guys. Over this past week I have read a total of 8 books, so we're going to jump in and talk about all 8 books I've read over this past week. I will then at the end of this video touch on the N.E.W.T.s magical readathon and how I'm going with all of the prompts and what ones I've managed to check off so far in August. So let's jump in to the books. So the very first book that I completed over this past week was Wildcard by Rachel Vincent. This is the third book in the... Why can I never remember the name of this series? I'll put it on the screen. I've completely forgotten the name of it again, and I've looked it up twice since I filmed last week when I forgot it. And I've forgotten it once again. It's the spin-off series to the Shifters series. Each book is a companion novel. They're much more romance focused. Each book follows a different couple. I was very intrigued to read this third book because it does include a character that has been around from the Shifters series for a really long time. So we've seen this character for a long time. So I was quite excited to pick it up. It's my least favorite of this series so far, just purely due to the fact that the characters had no chemistry. They just didn't have any chemistry together, like the whole time I was reading it. And so the author had mentioned, so I should say this is a adult urban fantasy series. It follows on werecats, which are basically panther-like creatures that humans can shift into. And so the author mentions at the start that she wanted to scale things back because these books can be like, they're very romance heavy, and they can be like quite romance and like steamy kind of at times. But this one, she mentioned that she really pulled back on that because the main female character in particular in this one is only 18. Well, she's 18. So I was like, she's still legal. She's still an adult. I don't know why we had to scale back on it because it's not that there's a problem with that, but it's very different from the first 2 books. And then I thought, well, okay, that's fine. You could really create some great tension between the 2 characters because of that, and I think she was trying to do that, but it really just missed the mark for me. I just really didn't feel the chemistry between the 2 like romantic interests at all for some reason. And so because it is so romance focused, this particular spin-off series, it just kind of missed the mark for me, and I ended up giving it just 3 stars. I then read Murder of Crows by Anne Bishop. This is book 2 in the Others series. This is an adult urban fantasy, soft fantasy series that follows there are humans, but there are also others, which are all different types of creatures. There are werewolf creatures, vampire creatures. Humans can turn into a lot of different stuff, like a lot of different animals, crows, bears. I think they mentioned that there's panthers, there's sharks. There's also elemental creatures in this as well. There's a lot of different like fantasy paranormal creatures going on in this, and we follow basically a main character named Meg, who is a blood prophet. She's human, but she's a blood prophet. Blood prophets are very rare and they're very, very valuable. So that's the kind of the premise of the series overall. As I mentioned, this is book 2. I did enjoy this. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as book 1. I did really, really like that we get a lot more. So I mentioned that the main thing I really liked about this book in the first book, which was called Written in Red, was that I really liked both the characters and the world, and that continues to be the case in this one. We get a lot more even of the world and a lot more development on blood prophets and what they are and how it works and all of that type of thing. I find all of that very, very interesting. This series also has a super slow burn like romance going on in it, kind of romance, which I really enjoy as well. And I did enjoy this. I just didn't enjoy it quite as much as the first one. I ended up giving this one 3.75 stars. I then read Marianne's Bad Luck Mystery by Anne M. Martin. This is book 17, I think it was, in the Babysitters Club series. So this one just follows Marianne at the start of the book receives a old school chain letter. I don't know if you guys remember chain letters. If you're too young, it was a very big thing back in, well, obviously even back in the 80s, because this book is published in 88, the year I was born. And I remember them more getting them on email, you know, when you used to get those emails that say, forward this on, and if you don't forward it on, it's bad luck. So this is the like letter equivalent. Obviously this predates the internet. She gets a letter in the mail that says if she doesn't mail it on to 20 friends, then she'll have bad luck. She chooses not to mail it on and starts to experience some bad luck. That's basically the story that we're following. This one was just very much just okay for me. It was still enjoyable and cute, but there wasn't any like great messages or anything that I took out of it the way that I quite often do with Babysitter's Club books. Quite often the B plot is like the interesting part of these books to me, and there wasn't really any interesting B plot going on. This is kind of I think it's the introduction. I don't think she's been mentioned so far, but it is the introduction of a character called Koki, who is kind of a nemesis to the Babysitter's Club. And I don't know if I remember her more because she is a character that I remember a lot from the Babysitter's Club movie, which obviously I loved as well. So I was very excited to see her pop up in this book. But yeah, this one was really just okay, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. I then listened on audio to a book called Not Bad People by Brandy Scott. This is well, what is this book? Because it's described as being a thriller. It is shelved on Goodreads as, I think, fiction, thriller, mystery. I think they're like the 3 tags on it. This book is not a thriller. So this is an Australian book. It's set in Australia. It is set in kind of a country town in Australia, and it follows 3 friends. They have been friends since they were teenagers, and they're now in their mid to late 30s to early 40s. And it's New Year's Eve, and they decide to do this letting go ceremony where they are going to let these paper lanterns off and kind of let go of, try to bring new growth into their lives because it's New Year's Eve, blah, blah, blah. And so they let off these paper lanterns. It is actually illegal now to let off paper lanterns. Like when they do it, they don't realize that, but they let off these paper lanterns. Come to realize a day or so later that there was a small plane, a small aircraft that crashed, and it's a father and son that were in the plane. A father and a teenage son were in the plane, who are both severely injured, possibly like they're in like ICU type of thing. And one of the women in particular starts to question whether their paper lanterns were possibly a cause of the accident. So that's kind of part of the story. It's this book, so the audio book, I listened to it on audio, which is narrated by Caroline Lee, I should mention that. Sorry, Caroline Lee. The audiobook was 17 and a half hours, I think. The physical book, from what I could tell from Goodreads, is over 500 pages, in fact, close to 600. This book is way too long. Like halfway through the book, I was just like, okay, like this has been going on forever, just get to the friggin' point. It is also not a thriller. It is just literally kind of a dramatic, almost women's fiction type story about these women and their lives. It was really quite boring. There isn't any real mystery to it. I mean, yes, you're kind of trying to figure out if the women had anything to do with the accident, and there are, I guess, so a lot of stuff comes up about their past and different stuff like that, but none of it is particularly mysterious or particularly thrilling at all. It's definitely not thrilling. There are some mystery aspects, kinda, but nothing super interesting. It's super predictable. Everything that happens, you can really kind of figure out what's gonna happen. Also, the 3 characters are awful. They're all terrible people. They all do really awful things, particularly like within their friendships. Like they do awful things like to each other, and I was just like, if this is someone that you consider to be like one of the best friends of your life, you guys are real shit to each other. Like I just really didn't enjoy it. And I'm not the type of person who has to like the characters in order to enjoy a book, but I feel like in this type of novel where it's like kind of a dramatic story where you're supposed to be invested in these characters and their lives and want them to have a good outcome, and I just really couldn't have given 2 shits what happened to any of these characters because I didn't like any of them because they were all just really awful, and you're supposed to be kind of rooting for them to like sort out these situations, and I was just like, don't really care if it turns out well for you because you're kind of an awful person. It was like that type of thing. I just really didn't enjoy that book, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. I then read Appointment with Death by Agatha Christie. This is the next book in the Hercule Poirot series. I think it's like book 18, somewhere around there. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as I always do. This one, I was a little bit frustrated by the ending of the mystery because it's one of those circumstances where you get to the end and you're just, the way that everything happened, I just don't feel like there's any way for the reader to figure that out, which happens sometimes with Agatha Christie. Sometimes her mysteries are like so kind of convoluted that when you get like the resolution, it's like, oh, then this happened, and you're just like, how was I ever going to figure that out? Because so many parts of it you get very little clues to. Like you do, but the clues are so obscure. So I did still really enjoy it, and I enjoy all of her mysteries, and I still enjoy watching Hercule Poirot and his little idiosyncrasies and, you know, his quirks and trying to figure out the mysteries. I still enjoy all of that, but it definitely wasn't my favorite, but I did still really enjoy it. I gave that 3.5 stars. I then listened on audio to Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is narrated on audio by Paul Bomer. So this is the second book in the Farseer trilogy. This one is significantly longer than the first one. This audiobook was just under 30 hours. The physical copy is almost 700 pages. So this was a real long book. So the Farseer trilogy is a trilogy that we basically follow a character named Fitz through his life, pretty much. So in the first book, we're following him. He's very young, and he is the bastard son of like the king in waiting. So he's like the first prince, born prince, and he's the bastard son of him. The father gives up his rights to the throne pretty early on, and also dies. That's not really a spoiler, that happens pretty early on in the book. And we follow basically Fitz in his life in this kingdom, being the bastard son of the royal family. So he's like blood to the royal family, but he's like a lesser, like considered to be a lesser person because he was born on the wrong side of the sheets, as they say. And it is obviously a fantasy novel. You've got some magical elements. There's stuff in this story called skilling, which is basically like being able to like connect your mind to another person. And there is also another type of magic called the wit, which is being able to connect your mind with animals, which is considered a dirty magic, and like not like people consider people who can do it to be evil. And so that we're basically following Fitz throughout his life in this world. So I quite enjoyed the first book, and I enjoyed this second book even more than the first book. We get a lot of political like maneuverings and all of that in this novel, because it's a lot about people vying for the throne and lots of underhanded things that everyone's doing to try and make themselves seem better because people want to be king, and the different princes in waiting, and political marriages and all of that type of stuff. And it always, when I hear about stories like that, I'm like, I wouldn't enjoy that. But then I read it and I'm like, no, I really enjoy watching everyone backstab each other and all of the maneuverings and like rooting for the people who you think are the right person to be on the throne and wanting them to get there and all of that. I really enjoy all of that. I did give this the same rating that I gave the first book, which is 3.5, even though, as I mentioned, I did enjoy it more than the first book. But Robin Hobb's writing, it's not bad, but her stories are just so unnecessarily long. Like, as I mentioned, this book is close to 700 pages, and there's just so much of the story that I think we don't need that could be cut out, because you're following this character and his life. You just get so much unnecessary parts that I'm just like, did that need to be in there? I feel like there's chunks of like days and things that you see his life, and I'm just like, we didn't need that. We could just cut that part out of the story, and then it would have been a lot more faster paced and faster flowing. And it's not necessarily that it's super slow, but it is definitely meandering in its plot, in my opinion. Like I said, I did enjoy it. I really enjoyed the story. I enjoy Fitz as a character. I enjoy all of that, but it's just, I don't think it needs to be as long as what it is. So like I said, I gave that 3.5 stars. I then listened on audio to a book called Take Me Back by Megan March. This one is narrated on audio by Andy Arndt and Zachary Weber. So this is another case of where I really didn't enjoy this book, and one of the things that I was really annoyed about this book is similar to the other book that I didn't enjoy, which is that the genre. Oh my god, I just forgot the word genre for a minute. The genre of this book is not properly clear when you look this book up. So on Goodreads, the synopsis of this book just basically says that it's a romance between a couple who are already established. So they've been married for 2 years and their relationship is a little bit rocky. And they're going on this like tropical holiday to try to reconnect and try and save their marriage. That's what the synopsis says. And that is what this book is about until about halfway through, when all of a sudden we shift gears and we're now all of a sudden in a like suspense novel. And it just didn't make sense to the story. You get one half of the book where it's like this couple trying to save their romance, and you get flashbacks to when they first met and how they fell in love, and little flashes back to points in time throughout their marriage and how their marriage has, like the cracks have started to form in their marriage and why that's happened. And you get both of their perspectives, and so you're starting to think, you're looking at both of them, hearing both of their issues and blah, 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 and you're hoping they're going to be able to reconnect on this holiday and yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, like I said, halfway through, something happens and we're all of a sudden in like a suspense novel, and it didn't work in my opinion. To be fair, I wasn't really enjoying the book even before we hit the suspense part. The romantic dialogue is so cheesy, like really, really, really cheesy. Like every time any kind of romantic talk happened, I'm not even talking about like sexy talk, I'm just talking like romantic, like I love you so much type of talk, I was like rolling my eyes real hard because it was just real cheesy. I will also just warn that, and I'm not kink shaming anyone, 2 consenting adults, whatever, but just a warning that one of the sex scenes in particular in this novel does involve them doing kind of a rape role play, which was kind of, like I said, I'm not kink shaming anyone, 2 consenting adults, whatever they're into, that's totally fine, but it was a bit alarming. Like, you're just reading what you think is like a romance novel, and all of a sudden you get to this sex scene, and I was like, whoa, what's happening here? Why all of a sudden are we in a, like, rape role play? Like, what's happening here? It was a bit confronting to just all of a sudden be presented with that in just a standard romance story. But, so just a warning, because I think it could trigger some people, so just a warning that that is in there. Like I say, I really didn't enjoy that book. I gave it 2 stars. And then the final book that I've read over this past week is Vision in Silver by Anne Bishop. This is the 3rd book in the Others series. Again, not too much I can say about this because it is now the 3rd book in a series. Really, this one was a little bit, I'm still really enjoying the series, but this one is a little bit slower in the plot. Like, I don't think too much happens in this. The kind of overarching plot to the story that we have is definitely progressed. We get a lot of, one of the things that this series really focuses on is the issues in the like relationships between the humans and the others. And I really like that we're seeing it more from the perspective of the others and that the humans, because there is a movement of people in this who think that humans are superior to others and want others to not exist and all of that. So we get kind of all of that in here, which I do really like, all the commentary on that, and I do find all of that really interesting. Like I say, I did still really enjoy this one, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. So those are the books that I read. So now, just quickly, because I don't want this video to be super long, but I do want to quickly touch on the N.E.W.T.s Magical Readathon and talk about what prompts I have checked off. So in my TBR, I mentioned that I thought that you, within each subject itself, with the acceptable, exceeds expectations and outstanding, that I didn't think you had to do them in order. However, I was then, when I was editing that video and I was looking into it more, I realized that actually on the very top of the sheet that you can download as part of the readathon that gives you all the prompts, it actually says on the top that you do have to do them in order. And so I was like, oh shit, you do have to do them in order. However, then following that, I came across a tweet on Twitter that someone else had asked the same question as me, and they seem to be saying that no, you didn't, that like I'd said that as long as you do hit all 3, that you can have recognition for all 3. But like, you know, if you hit the O but you never got the A, then you can't, it's not going to count. But it didn't matter if you got them in order. So I was like, well, now I don't know. But then I just thought, Karen, let's challenge ourselves and let's try to do it in order so that I have to get the A before I can move on to the E, etc. Because I do read a lot of books in a month, so I thought it might be too easy to check off a lot of these if I just allowed myself to do it willy-nilly. So I thought for myself, I wanted to challenge myself, and I was only going to be able to check things off in order. So that is what I've been doing. So to quickly touch on what I have accomplished so far. So I have achieved an acceptable level in arithmancy. That challenge for that was to read a book that ends on an even page number. For that, I used The Woods Volume 2 by James Tiny and the Fourth, which had 112 pages, which is an even number. I have received a Exceeds Expectation in Care of Magical Creatures. So for A was the prompt to follow the spiders. Why couldn't it be follow the butterflies? Read a book starting with A for Aragog. And for that, I used Appointment with Death by Agatha Christie. Then the Exceeds Expectation prompt was to read a book that was under 300 pages. For that, I used Take Me Back by Megan March, which is 270 pages. I then have achieved an outstanding in Charms, which is one of the requirements that I had to achieve to get my chosen career of Charms Professor. So for the acceptable level in Charms, you had to read a book that has a gorgeous cover. So for that, I ended up using Written in Red by Anne Bishop, which I'll put a picture of the edition that I have because I didn't bring it in here. Oh, actually, it's right here. It's on this shelf right here. I can show you. This is the cover. So a bit of a spanner was thrown in the works by having to do this in order because I'd already read this before I realized that. And I was actually going to use this for the prompt of having to read the book that you first thought of, like when she read out the prompts. And so I was a bit like, oh shit, because I'd already read this and that's further on and I hadn't done the acceptable. So I've had to figure out, I'm gonna have to figure something else out to do for that prompt because obviously I can't use this for that. But this was the only book that I was reading this month that I really do like the cover of. And so I decided to use this for that prompt instead because I really do like this like wolf outline because werewolves are very prominent in this series with them, the shape of her face and the woods in the background. I do really like this cover. And so I used that one for that prompt. Then for Exceeds Expectations in Charms, the prompt was to read a comic, graphic novel or manga or to read a book under 150 pages. And so for that, I used Marianne's Bad Luck Mystery by Anne M. Martin because that was 130 something pages. And then for Outstanding in Charms, it's the Spongify charm, which is just to read a paperback. So I assigned, not that one, Vision in Silver by Anne Bishop because this is just a mass market paperback. So I used that for that. I then have also achieved an acceptable in History of Magic. The prompt for that was to read a fantasy. I used Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. I have achieved an acceptable in Muggle Studies. The prompt for that was to read a cover with an actual photo element. So like a person, an item, a place. For that, I used Wildcard by Rachel Vincent because there are two real life people on the cover. I've achieved an acceptable in Transfiguration. The prompt for that was to read a book with LGBT themes. I used Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. That tongue ties me every time, that title. Oh, I've achieved Outstanding in Transfiguration as well because I've got, for the E, I got, which is a book that's not the first in a series. For that, I used Murder of Crows by Anne Bishop. And for Outstanding in Transfiguration, the prompt was McGonagall Doesn't Mess Around. Read a book that's over 500 pages. And for that, I used Not Bad People by Brandy Scott that I listened to an audio, like I mentioned, that was close to 600 pages in physical copy. So that's it. Those are all of the prompts that I have checked off so far. So in terms of being on track for my career, I have achieved getting an Outstanding in Charms. I have got acceptable in at least 2 other subjects. Like I said, I've got acceptable in what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in at least 5 other subjects so far. So the thing that I still need to get is that I need to get at least Exceeds Expectations in Defense Against the Dark Arts, which I think is going to be a little ways down the track because the first prompt for that, I need to read my reread, and that's a little bit further down my TBR. So I don't think I'll be achieving that till later in the month, but I am still confident that I can achieve all of the challenges and that I can become the new Charms Hogwarts Professor. So that's it, you guys. Those are all of the books that I have recently been reading. Oh, I guess I'll just quickly touch on what I'm currently reading. I'm currently reading The Promise by Teresa Driscoll. This is one of my NetGalley books that I received a digital e-arc in exchange for an honest review. I think I'm about 15% of the way through it. I actually just started it earlier today. So that's what I'm currently reading. It's a thriller. I don't have too many thoughts on it so far because, like I said, I've just barely started it. That is what I'm currently reading. But yeah, that's everything I've recently been reading. That's how I'm doing so far in the N.E.W.T.s Magical Readathon. I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below if you've got any thoughts on what I've been reading, or I would love to know how you guys are going in the N.E.W.T.s Readathon if you guys are participating. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. That is all I have for this video today. Bye, guys.